Sometimes it is only beef gelatin that is used. At times you will find pork gelatin used, and at times you will find a blend of both gelatins being used. In the technical and photographic industry, as a photo emulsion, paper coating, printing emulsion, as a match binder, adhesive glue, and commonly where everybody uses envelopes, we find you will take an envelope and the glue on the envelope, lick the glue on the envelope to seal the envelope, not realizing that pork gelatin and non-halal gelatin is also used in that glue, which you are using to seal the envelope with your saliva. So caution should be taken with regards to that. Paintball shooting, which has become a very, very common pastime and sport in many countries. The paint encapsulation is also used with pig gelatin. Now we ask the question, there's further ramifications of a sport like that. If that paint gets onto your clothing, there's najis on your clothing. If it gets onto your body, there's najis onto your body, and the ramifications of salah which follow. Nutraceutical and pharmaceutical industry, booming in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Many products in this area also contain gelatin. It's been used for many years as a hydrolyzed protein in toiletry products, shampoos, conditioners, lipstick, nail polish, and also as a collagen source in topical skin creams. So what are the challenges that we face as Muslim consumers? Both as Muslim trade and end consumers, we face a major dilemma. The high possibility of pig and or non-halal gelatin being used in products when the ingredient disclosure simply says gelatin. We do not have any idea whether it is pig gelatin, whether it's a blend of both pig and bovine, or whether it is fish gelatin or acceptable halal gelatin. It may specify the source, but at that time, if it says bovine gelatin, we have no idea whether it is from a dhabiha, halal slaughtered source, or a non-halal slaughtered source. And many a time there is no mention of gelatin, but the gelatin is hid under various guises. And this is where a major problem is faced by consumers, where you buy a tub of yogurt and it only says stabilizer. It doesn't tell you what stabilizer is used. And there we find some of the terms under which gelatin is hidden: emulsifier, stabilizer, glazing agent. Ironically, the industry marketing also does their research, so where they know that consumers are sensitive, they use appropriate category terms to at times mislead consumers. And we found this in South Africa, where countries that used to stipulate gelatin now no longer stipulate gelatin, but they simply say gelling agent. Conflicting viewpoints. There is consensus, fortunately, among most scholars and certifiers that if it comes from pig, there's consensus it is haram. Even those that apply the rule of transformation find difficulty in accepting pork gelatin. Cattle, if it is dhabiha, there's consensus it is halal. If it's from a non-dhabiha source, then we do not accept it as halal. However, those that apply the rule of transformation and istihala are of the view that it is halal. Poultry, the same rule will apply as the above. And fish, there is consensus that fish gelatin, pure fish gelatin is halal. Now the view of istihala. What is istihala? Istihala is a drastic change or metamorphosis of a substance in terms of the embedded intrinsic characteristics and qualities. Now the fuqaha have many hundreds of years ago, in the books especially of Hanafi fiqh, spoken about the example or the incident of a donkey falling into a salt pan. Now it's very, very important to note that firstly it was a special circumstance upon which the jurist had to make a ruling. And the second thing is that no jurist has ever mentioned that you should take dead donkeys and carrion meat and throw it into the salt pan to make more salt. This was under special circumstances that this ruling had been applied. And even then, the Arabic text which follows this particular ruling is وَبِهِ يُفْتَى لِلْبَلْوَى. And it is due to public predicament that this particular ruling has been issued and adopted. So, and then further if we look, it's not only simple chemical change, but there's been total disintegration and that donkey that has died into that salt pan has taken the form of salt. The donkey itself hasn't, leave it in the sun and it becomes salt, no. Because of the fact that it was immersed in that salt and disintegrated into it, and therefore the fuqaha had given that ruling. In the process of gelatin, it's not taken and put into anything else. It is purely denatured. Firstly, the process of chemical reaction takes place, and thereafter it's denatured through heat, through thermal application. The opposing view is that there is no transformation that takes place, but the entire process is one of extraction. We ask, is the acid and alkaline treatment called istihala? Or is boiling and cooking called istihala? Or is the melting process called istihala? Or is chemical change the determining factor for istihala? Where do we draw the line? If we say that these processes cause istihala, then everything would be halal. Because every ingredient would go through some chemical reaction, some process of cooking, boiling and melting or the other. Then your ingredients like your stearates and your monodiglycerides and your glycerin and your cysteine, etc. from human hair, all that would fall in the ambit of istihala and would be deemed permissible. Where would we draw the line? I'd like to emphasize that Sharia is the basis for a decision. As Ali radiallahu anhu, the third Khalifa of Islam, mentioned, لو كان الدين بالرأي لكان المسح على أسفل الخف أولى من الأعلى. That if the deen was determined on analogy and reasoning, then it would have been prescribed that you make masah on your leather sock at the bottom and not the top of it. So deen is not based on analogy and reasoning. Yes, indeed, we need science and we need chemistry and technology to understand the complex detail of the ingredients and processes involved. However, the basis of decision is not scientific change or chemical changes. It is purely the Sharia, and the deductions and conclusions should be based on that as well. I'll give you a simple example of that of alcohol and vinegar. Now if you take wine and you put it through a process of oxidation and it becomes vinegar. In that end vinegar there will be a percentage of alcohol that is of a residual level, which the scientists will look through their microscopes and do the analytical tests and tell you that there is so many percent of alcohol in this vinegar. Yet the Sharia dictates it to be halal. Now if you take a sauce, and we experienced this 3 years ago when we went to Sri Lanka, a product like teriyaki sauce was certified halal, although alcohol was used in that product as an end raw material, not in the process of fermentation, natural fermentation that it occurred. Scientists, now if you look at it purely from a Bureau of Science, vinegar has 0.x% of alcohol. And you take this teriyaki sauce and put alcohol of the same percentage into that teriyaki sauce. Scientifically, there's the vinegar, it has 0.3%. Here's your teriyaki sauce in which you've added 0.3%. The Sharia will say the vinegar is halal and will declare the teriyaki sauce is haram. No matter how much from a scientific angle you may argue that they both contain the same level of ethanol, but the Sharia would declare the one is halal and the other is not. Take the other example of a boiled egg. Liquid albumin protein is taken and obviously heated, it is denatured, it undergoes a major and drastic chemical change. It's produced a new substance which is now insoluble in water, and science confirms this massive drastic chemical change. But the Sharia would disregard that chemical change and regard the raw egg and the boiled egg as one and the same. Major authorities, alhamdulillah, only accept gelatin from zabiha raw material. If it comes from a non-zabiha source, major authorities do not accept it. The Islamic Fiqh Academy of Jeddah Rabita Al-Alam Al-Islami in Makkah, JAKIM, Malaysia, MUI, Indonesia, and fortunately majority of the World Halal Council members are also of the view that if the gelatin is from a non-zabiha source, it not be accepted for, as halal. In conclusion, what is the way forward? Firstly, we have to establish a unified and cohesive approach. Halal bodies, regulators and scholars should agree that only halal zabiha raw material be used. We have, some say 1.8, some say 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide, and we are all meat eaters. There is abundance of halal raw material available. But if we do not take the decision to accept only halal raw material, the industry, we are only benefiting the industry. And then utilizing, looking for loopholes to legitimize and legalize them using that non-halal raw material to feed the Muslim Ummah. We have to petition for adequate labeling legislation, both in Muslim countries as well as non-Muslim minority countries. In the meanwhile, we should insist on halal alternatives, and yes, our learned doctor will go through all the alternatives available. Muslim countries should make it an import requirement. And really this is the biggest strength that Muslims have in terms of economic power and this muscle, that we're able to dictate what we require. And this was evident when Malaysia and Indonesia put a ban on certain types of stomach. The Australian meat industry immediately met with the requirements that they had, because of the fact that we support and their economies are sustained by our purchases. Industry will never change, and I think this is an important point that has to be driven home. Industry will never change unless we demand that change. And it is time that we agree to only accept halal raw material in the process of food manufacture. Secondly, we should create awareness, and I think this lacks severely in both Muslim and non-Muslim countries among Muslim minorities, that there is this lack of awareness on a broad scale. If we create this awareness, consumers will also dictate and assist us in Muslim minority countries to demand what is acceptable for Muslims to eat.
Thank you very much.